Immanuel Kant is often regarded as one of the most important philosophers in Western thought, with his contributions shaping not only the course of philosophy, but also influencing diverse fields such as political theory, ethics, aesthetics, and the natural sciences. His ideas revolutionized philosophy and gave rise to a new way of thinking that would dominate intellectual life for centuries. Born in 1724 in Königsberg, modern-day Kaliningrad, Russia, Kant was a man of modest means and lived most of his life in relative obscurity. Yet his work continues to resonate deeply in academic circles and beyond. This chapter offers an introduction to Kant's life and his legacy, highlighting the major milestones of his intellectual journey and setting the stage for the exploration of his ideas in the following chapters. Kant's philosophical system is best known for its combination of metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. His most famous work, The Critique of Pure Reason, marks a pivotal moment in philosophy, as it sought to reconcile the seemingly incompatible schools of thought that dominated the intellectual landscape of the 17th and 18th centuries. On the one hand, rationalism emphasized the role of reason and innate ideas in the acquisition of knowledge, as seen in the works of Descartes and Leibniz. On the other hand, empiricism, championed by figures like Locke and Hume, argued that knowledge comes primarily from sensory experience. Kant's revolutionary insight was that both reason and experience play vital roles in shaping human knowledge, but their relationship was more complex than either tradition had recognized. His philosophy provided a framework for understanding how the mind structures experience and how we come to know the world. One of the key elements of Kant's philosophy is his notion of transcendental idealism, which suggests that while we can never know the world as it truly is in itself, the noumenon, we can know the world as it appears to us through the lens of human perception and understanding, the phenomenon. This distinction had profound implications for metaphysics, as it questioned the possibility of knowing ultimate reality, yet allowed for a structured, systematic approach to knowledge grounded in human experience. In effect, Kant transformed philosophy by shifting the focus away from metaphysical speculations about the nature of reality to an inquiry into the conditions that make knowledge possible. Kant's moral philosophy, another cornerstone of his work, was equally groundbreaking. He argued that morality is grounded in reason and that individuals must act in accordance with principles that could be universally applied. This led to the development of his famous categorical imperative, a principle that commands individuals to act only according to maxims that they would want to become a universal law. Kant's insistence on universal moral laws, detached from contingent social or cultural norms, set his ethical theory apart from earlier models, such as utilitarianism or virtue ethics. His ethics have had a profound influence on contemporary moral philosophy and are still a central point of discussion for scholars interested in deontological approaches to ethics. Kant's ideas on political theory are also significant and reflect his deep commitment to the ideals of the Enlightenment. He argued that political freedom and autonomy are fundamental to human dignity, and that a just society must be based on the rule of law and the protection of individual rights. His essay, Perpetual Peace, presented a vision of a world governed by principles of international law, which anticipated later ideas about cosmopolitanism and global justice. Kant's belief in the importance of autonomy, both individual and political, aligns with the broader ideals of the Enlightenment, which sought to promote human rights, rationality, and the free exercise of thought. In addition to his philosophical contributions, Kant was a key figure in the intellectual context of the Enlightenment. His ideas were part of a larger movement that sought to challenge traditional authorities, including the church and monarchy, and to promote human reason as the guiding principle of both individual and collective life. Kant's famous essay, What is Enlightenment?, calls on individuals to dare to know and to use their reason independently of external authorities. This call for intellectual freedom and autonomy resonated widely, contributing to the cultural and political changes of the 18th century. Despite his profound influence, Kant's life was relatively uneventful. He spent most of his life in Königsberg, never traveling farther than the surrounding region. He was deeply dedicated to his academic work, giving lectures on a variety of subjects including metaphysics, natural science, and logic. His reputation as a teacher and scholar grew slowly, and it was not until his mid-50s with the publication of the Critique of Pure Reason in 1781 that he became widely recognized as a leading philosopher. Even so, much of Kant's fame came after his death in 1804, as his ideas continued to shape the trajectory of European philosophy and beyond. Kant's philosophy has influenced countless thinkers across a variety of traditions. In Germany, his ideas inspired the German idealists, such as Johann Gottlieb Fichte, Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph Schelling, and Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. These philosophers sought to build upon Kant's work, pushing his ideas further into the realms of metaphysics and the philosophy of history. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Kant's ideas also laid the groundwork for the development of existentialism, phenomenology, and analytic philosophy, with figures like Soren Kierkegaard, Edmund Husserl, and Ludwig Wittgenstein engaging with Kantian themes. At the same time, Kant's ideas were subject to critique. The later German philosophers, including Hegel, critiqued Kant's system for being overly formal and abstract, while figures in the empiricist and positivist traditions, such as Auguste Kant and David Hume, challenged his views on the nature of human knowledge and the possibility of metaphysics. In the 20th century, the rise of postmodernism also presented a challenge to Kant's ideas, as thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Michel Foucault questioned the universality of Kantian categories and the possibility of objective knowledge. In the contemporary world, Kant's philosophy continues to influence a wide range of disciplines, from ethics to political theory to cognitive science. His emphasis on reason, autonomy, and the moral law has made him a touchstone for debates about human rights, justice, and democracy. His critical philosophy, which sought to understand the limits and possibilities of human knowledge, has influenced theories of perception, consciousness, and the mind. His ideas remain an essential part of the philosophical canon and continue to shape contemporary debates across various fields. Kant's life and work stand as a testament to the power of human reason to question, to explore, and to reshape our understanding of the world. Despite the complexities of his philosophy, Kant's enduring influence reveals the timeless nature of his insights into the nature of knowledge, morality, and human existence. Immanuel Kant was born on April 22, 1724, in Königsberg, Prussia, now Kaliningrad, Russia, a city that was at the crossroads of European intellectual, political, and economic life during the 18th century. He was the fourth of 9 children in a modest family, and his early life was shaped by the religious and intellectual environment of his time. Kant's father, Johann Georg Kant, was a harness maker, and his mother, Anna Regina, came from a family of modest means. Kant's upbringing was marked by the influence of Pietism, a religious movement that emphasized personal devotion, morality, and the importance of Scripture. While his early years were rooted in a devout Lutheran household, his later philosophical development would move away from religious dogma and towards a more rigorous, critical examination of knowledge and human experience. Kant's early education was provided by the Pietist school in Königsberg, where he demonstrated a keen interest in learning. The educational system of the time was deeply rooted in Christian teachings, and Kant's early exposure to religion would later be a significant factor in his critique of metaphysical and theological claims. At the age of 16, Kant entered the University of Königsberg, where he studied a wide range of subjects, including theology, philosophy, and mathematics. His decision to study philosophy was influenced by his desire to understand the nature of reality and human knowledge. The intellectual climate at Königsberg during the early 18th century was one of intense intellectual activity, with scholars from different traditions engaging in debates about the nature of the universe and humanity's place within it. One of the most significant influences on Kant's early intellectual development was the work of the rationalist philosophers, particularly René Descartes and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Descartes' emphasis on doubt and the methodical search for certainty through reason deeply resonated with Kant. Descartes' meditations on first philosophy provided a framework for understanding the self and its relationship to the external world. Similarly, Leibniz's metaphysics, with its ideas of pre-established harmony and monads, offered Kant an intellectual model for considering the nature of reality. However, While Kant was greatly influenced by these thinkers, he would ultimately criticize their reliance on innate ideas and metaphysical assumptions that could not be empirically verified. In contrast to the rationalists, Kant was also exposed to the ideas of the empiricists, most notably John Locke and David Hume. Locke's theory of knowledge, which emphasized the role of sensory experience as the source of all ideas, was important for shaping Kant's views on how humans acquire knowledge. Locke's empiricism argued that the mind at birth is a blank slate, and experience is what shapes our understanding of the world. Similarly, David Hume's skepticism about the certainty of knowledge and his focus on human psychology influenced Kant's thinking, particularly in terms of the limits of human cognition and the role of experience in shaping our beliefs. However, it was Hume's skepticism that would have a profound and transformative impact on Kant. In his A Treatise of Human Nature, Hume questioned the very foundations of human knowledge, particularly the idea of causality. Hume argued that we cannot justify the belief in cause and effect relationships through reason alone. Instead, causality is a habit of thought derived from experience. This led to a deep crisis in Kant's thinking, as he realized that the basic assumptions underlying both rationalism and empiricism were unsatisfactory. Kant famously referred to this moment as his awakening from dogmatic slumber, as it prompted him to rethink the nature of human cognition and the possibility of knowledge. In response to this intellectual crisis, Kant began to develop a new approach to epistemology that would become the foundation of his later work. He rejected the idea that knowledge is either entirely derived from sensory experience, as the empiricists maintained, or entirely the product of reason and innate ideas, as the rationalists believed. Instead, Kant proposed that knowledge arises from the interaction between the mind's innate structures and the sensory data it receives. This led him to develop his theory of transcendental idealism, which posits that while we cannot know things as they are in themselves, the noumenon, we can know things as they appear to us, the phenomenon. Kant's early intellectual career was marked by a series of academic positions that allowed him to refine his ideas and establish himself as a respected scholar. In 1755, Kant was appointed as a lecturer at the University of Königsberg, where he taught subjects such as metaphysics, logic, and natural science. It was during this period that he began to work on his first significant philosophical writings, including the Universal Natural History and Theory of the Heavens, 1755, a work in which he proposed a nebular hypothesis for the origin of the solar system. Although this early work in natural science was well received, it was his later philosophical writings that would make Kant famous and secure his place in the history of philosophy. Kant's academic career was not without its challenges. Despite his growing intellectual reputation, he struggled to gain a position of significant influence within the academic establishment. Much of his early work was published anonymously, and his ideas were often met with skepticism by the established philosophical community. Nevertheless, Kant's perseverance paid off, and in 1770, he was appointed to a full professorship at the University of Königsberg, where he would remain for the rest of his life. This period marked the beginning of the most productive phase of Kant's career, during which he would publish his most important works. Kant's intellectual maturation was deeply influenced by the intellectual currents of his time, particularly the Age of Enlightenment, which emphasized reason, science, and the importance of individual autonomy. The Enlightenment ideals of intellectual freedom and skepticism toward traditional authority resonated with Kant, who believed that human beings were capable of using reason to understand the world and to improve their moral and political lives. In his famous essay, What is Enlightenment?, Kant defined enlightenment as humanity's emergence from self-imposed immaturity, calling on individuals to dare to know and to think for themselves. This essay encapsulated Kant's belief in the power of reason to guide individuals toward greater intellectual and moral autonomy. While Kant's early life and education were shaped by a variety of intellectual influences, it was his ability to synthesize the best elements of rationalism and empiricism that would enable him to create a novel and enduring philosophical system. His education at the University of Königsberg provided him with the tools to grapple with the most pressing questions of his time, and it laid the groundwork for the development of his critical philosophy. In the chapters that follow, we will explore the specifics of Kant's major philosophical works, beginning with his breakthrough publication, The Critique of Pure Reason, which would forever change the course of philosophy. Kant's early life and education were marked by a blend of religious influences, exposure to the leading philosophical traditions of the time, and a growing sense of intellectual curiosity. His academic journey was not linear or easy, but it led him to question the very nature of knowledge, experience, and reality. The intellectual foundations that were laid during his early years in Königsberg would serve as the cornerstone for his later philosophical achievements, establishing Kant as one of the most important and transformative figures in the history of Western philosophy. Immanuel Kant's philosophy cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the intellectual milieu in which he was immersed, specifically the prevailing schools of thought that dominated European philosophy during his lifetime: rationalism and empiricism. These two movements, which emerged in the 17th century, laid the groundwork for Kant's own philosophical innovations. While these schools presented starkly contrasting views on the nature of human knowledge, it was Kant's critical engagement with both traditions that would ultimately lead to his formulation of a new approach to epistemology and metaphysics, one that integrated elements of both rationalism and empiricism. Rationalism, as exemplified by thinkers such as René Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, held that reason was the primary source of knowledge and that certain truths could be known a priori, independent of sensory experience. Descartes' foundational work, Meditations on First Philosophy, emphasized the power of doubt and the certainty of the thinking subject, encapsulated in his famous dictum, Cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. For Descartes, reason was the key to understanding the world, and through methodical doubt, one could arrive at indubitable knowledge. Leibniz, similarly, proposed a metaphysical system in which reality consisted of simple substances called monads, which could be known through reason alone. This rationalist perspective placed great confidence in the capacity of the human mind to uncover the structures of the universe through deductive reasoning. Empiricism, on the other hand, was a philosophical tradition that emphasized the role of sensory experience in the acquisition of knowledge. Thinkers like John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume argued that all human knowledge arises from experience, whether through the senses or reflection upon past experiences. Locke, in his essay concerning human understanding, famously posited that the mind at birth is a tabula rasa, blank slate, and knowledge is built up from sensory impressions that are processed and abstracted by the mind. For empiricists, knowledge was not innate, but acquired through interaction with the world. Hume, perhaps the most radical empiricist, cast doubt on the very possibility of certain knowledge, particularly in the realm of causality. He argued that our belief in cause and effect was not derived from reason, but was instead a product of habit and custom, a view that would significantly influence Kant's thinking. Kant's engagement with both rationalism and empiricism was marked by a recognition of the strengths and limitations of each tradition. On the one hand, he admired the rationalists' emphasis on reason and the possibility of certain knowledge, especially in mathematics and metaphysics. The rationalists' belief that the mind could grasp necessary truths about the world was compelling, and Kant was drawn to their systematic approach to understanding reality. However, Kant was also acutely aware of the limitations of the rationalist approach. He saw that the reliance on a priori reasoning without reference to empirical data led to abstract metaphysical speculations that could not be empirically verified. The rationalists, according to Kant, often mistook the mind's innate structures for truths about the external world. On the other hand, Kant was sympathetic to the empiricist's emphasis on sensory experience as the foundation of knowledge. He recognized the importance of experience in shaping our understanding of the world and agreed with the empiricists that all knowledge begins with sensory data. However, Kant found the empiricist's position to be equally problematic. The empiricists, particularly Locke and Hume, held that the mind was passive and that knowledge was simply a reflection of external reality. Kant argued that this view neglected the active role of the mind in organizing and structuring experience. Empiricism, in his view, failed to explain how the mind could impose order on the chaotic flow of sensory information. Kant's breakthrough came when he realized that both rationalism and empiricism offered partial explanations of human knowledge, but neither provided a complete account. He saw that knowledge was not merely the result of sensory experience, nor was it entirely independent of it. Rather, knowledge arose from the interaction between the mind's innate structures and the sensory data it received. In this way, Kant sought to reconcile the two traditions by developing a theory of knowledge that acknowledged both the active role of the mind and the importance of empirical experience. This theory would later become known as transcendental idealism. Kant's transcendental idealism posited that while we cannot know things as they are in themselves, the noumenon, we can know things as they appear to us through the lens of human perception, the phenomenon. According to Kant, the mind plays a crucial role in structuring experience through its innate categories, such as causality, time, and space. These categories, which are not derived from experience, but are instead a priori conditions for the possibility of experience, shape the way we perceive and understand the world. In this sense, Kant argued that the mind actively constructs our knowledge of the world, rather than passively receiving it. However, this construction is not arbitrary. It is constrained by the empirical data provided by the senses. In his Critique of Pure Reason, 1781, Kant developed this theory in detail, arguing that the mind imposes its categories on the sensory data it receives in order to make sense of the world. This was a radical departure from both the rationalist and empiricist traditions. For the rationalists, knowledge was a product of reason, independent of experience. For the empiricists, it was a product of sensory experience, without any active contribution from the mind. Kant, by contrast, argued that knowledge arises from the synthesis of sensory experience and the mind's inherent structures, which mediate and organize that experience. This synthesis is what makes knowledge possible, but it is also what limits our knowledge, for we can never know things as they are in themselves, only as they appear to us. The significance of Kant's encounter with rationalism and empiricism lies not only in the synthesis of these two traditions, but also in the way it transformed the course of modern philosophy. Kant's critical philosophy offered a new framework for understanding the nature of human knowledge, one that avoided the extremes of both rationalism and empiricism. His theory of knowledge emphasized the active role of the mind in structuring experience, while also acknowledging the importance of sensory data in shaping our understanding of the world. In this way, Kant laid the groundwork for much of the subsequent development of epistemology, metaphysics, and even ethics, as later philosophers would continue to grapple with the implications of his ideas. Kant's philosophy also had profound implications for the way in which we understand the limits of human knowledge. By positing that we can never know the world as it truly is in itself, Kant raised important questions about the possibility of objective knowledge and the scope of human cognition. His distinction between the noumenon, things as they are in themselves, and the phenomenon, things as they appear to us, challenged the traditional metaphysical assumptions about the nature of reality and our capacity to know it. This distinction would influence later philosophical developments, particularly in the German idealist tradition, where thinkers like Hegel would attempt to push Kant's ideas further. Kant's encounter with rationalism and empiricism was a crucial turning point in his intellectual development. While he was influenced by both traditions, he ultimately found their respective approaches to knowledge to be inadequate. His solution was to develop a new theory of knowledge, transcendental idealism, which synthesized the best elements of both rationalism and empiricism while addressing their shortcomings. This innovative approach not only transformed the course of philosophy, but also paved the way for future developments in epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics. Through his critical engagement with these two traditions, Kant was able to offer a novel and enduring account of how human beings come to know the world and the limitations of that knowledge. Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, 1781, stands as the defining work of his philosophical career, marking a dramatic departure from previous philosophical systems. In this monumental text, Kant sought to answer a profound question that had puzzled philosophers for centuries. How is knowledge possible? While both rationalism and empiricism had attempted to provide answers, Kant argued that neither tradition was entirely correct and that a new approach was needed, one that could reconcile the insights of both. In doing so, he laid the groundwork for what would become known as his critical philosophy, a framework that would shape the trajectory of modern philosophy and influence subsequent developments in epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics. At the heart of the critique of pure reason is Kant's groundbreaking theory of knowledge, which he referred to as transcendental idealism. The central insight of transcendental idealism is that human knowledge is not a passive reflection of external reality, but is instead shaped by the interaction between the mind's innate structures and the sensory data it receives. According to Kant, the mind plays an active role in organizing and structuring experience, and this active structuring is what makes knowledge possible. However, this process also imposes limitations on human knowledge, for while we can know how things appear to us, the phenomena, we can never know things as they are in themselves, the noumena. Kant's critical project in the critique of pure reason was to investigate the conditions for the possibility of knowledge. He sought to answer the question, what are the necessary conditions that allow us to have any knowledge of the world at all? Kant argued that in order for experience to be intelligible, it must be structured by certain a priori concepts or categories that are built into the very fabric of human cognition. These categories, such as causality, unity, and substance, are not derived from experience, but are instead the conditions under which experience is possible. Without these categories, Kant believed we would be unable to make sense of the raw data of sensation, and knowledge would be impossible. In this sense, Kant's philosophy represented a radical break with the empiricist tradition, which held that all knowledge comes from sensory experience. While empiricists like John Locke and David Hume had emphasized the passive nature of the mind in receiving sensory data, Kant argued that the mind is not a mere receptor of information. Rather, it actively organizes and structures experience according to its a priori categories. This was a significant shift in thinking, as it placed the human mind at the center of the process of knowledge formation, challenging the empiricist view that the mind simply copies the external world. At the same time, Kant's philosophy also represented a departure from the rationalist tradition, which had claimed that knowledge could be derived solely from reason. While rationalists like Descartes and Leibniz had emphasized the importance of innate ideas and reason in acquiring knowledge, Kant argued that these ideas were insufficient on their own. Knowledge, according to Kant, is not simply the result of deductive reasoning, but rather the product of the interaction between reason and experience. The mind's innate categories are necessary to organize and interpret sensory data, but they cannot generate knowledge in isolation from the empirical world. One of Kant's most important contributions in the critique of pure reason is his distinction between two kinds of knowledge, a priori and a posteriori. A priori knowledge is knowledge that is independent of experience and is necessary for the possibility of experience itself. For example, the principle of causality, one event causes another, is a priori because we do not derive it from experience, but rather it is a necessary condition for us to make sense of our experiences. A posteriori knowledge, on the other hand, is knowledge that is derived from experience. The fact that it is raining outside is a piece of a posteriori knowledge because it is based on sensory data that we acquire through experience. In addition to this distinction, Kant introduced another important distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments. Analytic judgments are those that are true by definition, such as all bachelors are unmarried. In these judgments, the predicate is contained within the subject, and no new knowledge is added. Synthetic judgments, on the other hand, are those in which the predicate adds something to the subject that is not contained within it, such as the cat is on the mat. In synthetic judgments, new information is introduced that is not logically contained in the concept of the subject. Kant's most revolutionary claim in the critique of pure reason was his assertion that there are synthetic a priori judgments, judgments that are both informative and independent of experience. This idea was groundbreaking because it challenged the prevailing understanding of how knowledge is acquired. According to Kant, certain fundamental truths about the world, such as the principles of mathematics and the laws of nature, are not derived from experience, but are instead the result of the mind's a priori structures. For example, the statement 7 plus 5 is equal to 12 is not a mere tautology, analytic, nor is it something that is learned from experience, a posteriori. Rather, It is a synthetic judgment that is made possible by the mind's a priori categories of arithmetic. In his investigation of the nature of knowledge, Kant also introduced the concept of the phenomenon and the noumenon. The phenomenon is the world as it appears to us, shaped by the mind's categories and sensory input. The noumenon, by contrast, is the world as it is in itself, independent of our perception. Kant famously argued that we can never have direct access to the noumenon because our knowledge is always mediated by the mind's categories. While we can know the world as it appears to us, we can never know things as they are in themselves. This distinction has far-reaching implications for Kant's metaphysics and epistemology, as it suggests that there are limits to human knowledge, and that certain aspects of reality are forever inaccessible to us. Kant's critique of metaphysics was another central aspect of the critique of pure reason. He argued that traditional metaphysical inquiries into the nature of God, the soul, and the universe were problematic because they attempted to make claims about the noumenal world, which is beyond the reach of human cognition. Metaphysical systems that sought to derive knowledge of the noumenon through reason alone were, in Kant's view, speculative and unjustified. Kant's critique of traditional metaphysics was not a rejection of metaphysical inquiry altogether, but rather a call for a more rigorous and critical approach that recognized the limits of human knowledge. The critique of pure reason also had a profound impact on the way Kant viewed the role of science. Kant was deeply interested in the natural sciences and believed that they offered a reliable means of understanding the world as it appears to us. However, he also recognized that the sciences were limited by the categories through which they interpreted experience. Scientific knowledge, Kant argued, could never tell us anything about the noumenal world, but it could provide valuable insights into the regularities and patterns of the phenomenal world. In this way, Kant's philosophy of science was both optimistic and cautious, affirming the value of empirical investigation while acknowledging its limitations. The critique of pure reason represents a profound and revolutionary shift in philosophical thinking. By reconciling the insights of rationalism and empiricism, Kant offered a new account of knowledge that emphasized the active role of the mind in organizing experience while acknowledging the importance of sensory data. His distinctions between a priori and a posteriori knowledge, as well as between analytic and synthetic judgments, provided a new framework for understanding the structure of human knowledge. At the same time, his critique of metaphysics and his emphasis on the limits of human cognition challenged traditional notions of reality and human understanding. The critique of pure reason remains a foundational text in the history of philosophy, and its influence can be seen in a wide range of philosophical traditions, from German idealism to contemporary epistemology and philosophy of science. Through this work, Kant established himself as one of the most important and enduring figures in the history of Western thought. Immanuel Kant's contributions to philosophy extend beyond epistemology and metaphysics. His ethical theory remains one of the most influential and enduring aspects of his legacy. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Kant sought to ground morality in reason rather than in empirical or sentimental considerations. Central to his ethical philosophy is the notion of duty and the concept of the categorical imperative, a principle that he argued could serve as the foundation for a universal moral law. Kant's ethical system is characterized by its emphasis on autonomy, rationality, and the inherent dignity of human beings, marking a significant departure from the more consequentialist or virtue-based theories that preceded him. Kant's ethical theory is laid out primarily in his work Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals, 1785, and is further developed in the Critique of Practical Reason, 1788. At the heart of Kant's moral philosophy is the idea that morality is not contingent upon the outcomes of actions or the inclinations of individuals, but is instead grounded in a rational, objective moral law. This law, according to Kant, is not based on subjective desires or external consequences, but is determined by the rational while acting in accordance with universal principles. Morality, in Kant's view, is a matter of duty, and individuals are morally obligated to act in accordance with reason, regardless of their personal desires or the consequences of their actions. Kant's concept of duty is intrinsically linked to his notion of the categorical imperative, which is the fundamental principle of his ethical system. The categorical imperative is an imperative that commands actions without any conditions or qualifications. Unlike hypothetical imperatives, which tell us what we must do to achieve a particular goal, e.g., if you want to get rich, work hard. The categorical imperative commands us to act according to a principle that can be universally applied, regardless of any particular end or desire. It is categorical because it applies universally and unconditionally, demanding that we act in ways that respect the moral law for its own sake. The first formulation of the categorical imperative, according to Kant, is the principle of universality. Act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. This formulation demands that individuals act in a way that their actions could be adopted universally, without contradiction. In other words, before taking any action, one must ask whether the rule guiding the action could be willed as a universal law that everyone could follow. If the action cannot be universalized without contradiction, then it is morally impermissible. For instance, if one were to lie in order to achieve a personal advantage, the maxim, "it is acceptable to lie to get what you want," would fail the test of universality, because if everyone lied in such a manner, trust would break down, and lying itself would cease to be effective. A second formulation of the categorical imperative is known as the principle of humanity. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end, and never merely as a means. This formulation emphasizes the inherent dignity and worth of individuals. According to Kant, each person has intrinsic value, and it is morally wrong to treat others solely as tools for achieving one's own goals. While individuals may be used as means to an end in certain situations, for example, one may employ a teacher to gain knowledge, Kant insists that they must never be treated as mere means. Rather, they must be respected as ends in themselves, with their own goals and autonomy. This formulation underscores Kant's commitment to the moral dignity of the individual, which is central to his ethical thought. The third formulation of the categorical imperative is sometimes referred to as the kingdom of ends principle. Act only so that your will can regard itself at the same time as making universal law through its maxims. This formulation extends the previous two by envisioning a moral community in which all individuals act in accordance with the moral law and respect one another as ends in themselves. In this ideal community, every person is both a legislator of the moral law and a subject to it, creating a moral kingdom where all individuals are treated with equal respect and dignity. Kant's emphasis on the kingdom of ends highlights the social and communal dimension of his ethical system, which is based on mutual respect and the recognition of each person's moral worth. Kant's emphasis on duty and the categorical imperative marks a significant departure from other ethical theories that prioritize consequences or character traits. In contrast to utilitarianism, which holds that the morality of an action is determined by its consequences, i.e., the greatest happiness for the greatest number, Kant's ethics rejects the idea that moral actions are justified by their outcomes. For Kant, actions are morally right or wrong based on whether they align with the categorical imperative, irrespective of the consequences. This emphasis on duty also sets Kant apart from virtue ethics, which focuses on cultivating virtuous character traits and achieving moral excellence. While virtue ethics emphasizes the development of good character, Kantian ethics is concerned with acting out of duty, guided by reason, and in accordance with the moral law. One of the central themes of Kant's ethics is the idea of autonomy, which refers to the capacity for self-rule or self-determination. For Kant, autonomy is the foundation of morality, as it allows individuals to legislate the moral law for themselves. Autonomy is not simply a matter of acting according to one's desires or preferences, but of acting in accordance with reason and moral duty. Kantian autonomy requires that individuals act from a sense of duty and respect for the moral law, rather than from mere inclination or external influence. It is through autonomy that individuals can exercise their rational capacities and realize their moral worth as free, rational beings. The importance of autonomy in Kant's ethical theory is linked to his view of human beings as ends in themselves, deserving of respect and dignity. Kant rejects any form of moral paternalism, which seeks to impose moral rules on individuals for their own good. Instead, he believes that moral agents must act freely and rationally, guided by their understanding of the moral law. This vision of autonomy also has significant implications for political philosophy, as Kantian ethics supports the idea of a just society in which individuals are free to make their own moral choices and are not treated as mere objects of manipulation or control. Kant's insistence on duty, universality, and the respect for human dignity has led to his ethical theory being regarded as a deontological approach to ethics. Deontology, from the Greek word deon meaning duty, holds that morality is grounded in the adherence to rules or principles, rather than the consequences of actions. Kant's ethics, therefore, prioritizes moral rules that are universally valid and grounded in reason. While critics have sometimes pointed to the rigid and absolute nature of Kantian moral rules as problematic, especially in cases where conflicting duties arise, Kant's theory has remained influential in contemporary moral philosophy and has shaped debates on topics such as human rights, justice, and autonomy. One of the enduring strengths of Kant's moral philosophy is its emphasis on the universality and impartiality of moral principles. Kant's categorical imperative provides a clear and systematic way to evaluate moral actions, offering a framework that is not contingent upon subjective preferences, social norms, or historical context. This universality makes Kant's ethics particularly attractive to those who seek a moral system that applies equally to all people, regardless of their background or circumstances. Kantian ethics has been especially influential in the development of human rights theory, where the inherent dignity and autonomy of individuals are recognized as fundamental moral principles. Kant's ethical theory, with its emphasis on duty, universality, and respect for human dignity, represents a monumental contribution to moral philosophy. By grounding morality in reason rather than in the consequences of actions or the development of virtuous character, Kant offered a new and rigorous approach to ethical reasoning that has had lasting implications for both philosophy and practical ethics. His notion of the categorical imperative, with its focus on the universalizability of moral principles and the intrinsic value of human beings, continues to serve as a cornerstone of moral thought. Kant's moral philosophy remains a powerful and compelling framework for understanding the nature of moral duty, autonomy, and respect for the dignity of individuals in both personal and societal contexts. Immanuel Kant's philosophy had profound implications not only for ethics and metaphysics, but also for political thought. While his works on practical reason primarily focused on individual moral action, his ideas about autonomy, freedom, and justice have had lasting effects on the way political philosophers understand the nature of rights, the structure of political authority, and the concept of a just society. Kant's political philosophy is rooted in his deontological ethics, particularly the notion of the moral law and the importance of individual autonomy. In this chapter, we will explore how Kant's views on freedom and the moral law influenced his political thought, particularly with regard to the ideal structure of society and the principles of justice. Kant's concept of freedom, as presented in his ethical writings, is central to his political philosophy. For Kant, freedom is not simply the ability to do whatever one desires, but rather the capacity to act in accordance with reason and moral duty. True freedom, Kant argues, is the freedom to act according to the categorical imperative, to act in ways that respect the moral law. This understanding of freedom is closely tied to Kant's conception of autonomy, which he sees as the foundation of moral and political life. Autonomy, for Kant, is the ability to govern oneself through rational principles, and it is only within a society that recognizes and respects individual autonomy that true freedom can flourish. Kant's idea of freedom has important implications for his views on political authority. According to Kant, the legitimate authority of the state must be derived from the consent of the governed, but this consent is not based on personal preference or social utility. Instead, Kant argues that political authority is justified only if it is consistent with the moral law and respects the autonomy of individuals. In other words, political institutions must respect the rational will of individuals and treat them as ends in themselves, not merely as means to an end. This principle of treating individuals as ends is the foundation for Kant's argument for human rights and his opposition to forms of political power that infringe upon personal autonomy. Kant's political philosophy also includes a theory of justice that is closely linked to his ethical principles. In his work The Metaphysics of Morals, 1797, Kant argues that justice is a central component of a just society, and he outlines a legal framework that is designed to protect individual rights and promote the common good. Kant's theory of justice is rooted in the idea of universal moral laws that are binding on all individuals, and he asserts that these laws must be enshrined in the institutions of the state. Justice, in Kant's view, is not a matter of promoting happiness or welfare, but of ensuring that individuals are treated with respect and dignity and that their rights are protected from violations by others. A key feature of Kant's political theory is his insistence on the separation of powers within the state. Drawing from his broader commitment to autonomy and individual freedom, Kant argues that political power should be distributed among different branches of government, each with its own distinct functions and responsibilities. This separation of powers is designed to prevent any one branch of government from becoming too powerful and infringing upon the rights and freedoms of individuals. Kant's model of government is one in which the state's authority is exercised within the bounds of a system of checks and balances, ensuring that individual freedoms are safeguarded. Kant's emphasis on the protection of individual rights also extends to his views on property. Kant believed that individuals have a natural right to property, which is necessary for their autonomy and freedom. In his doctrine of right, Kant argues that property rights must be protected by the state to ensure that individuals can pursue their own goals and live according to their rational will. However, Kant also emphasizes that property rights are not absolute. They must be balanced with the rights of others and the needs of society as a whole. In this sense, Kant's theory of property is based on the idea of mutual respect and the recognition of the dignity of others, rather than on a purely individualistic conception of ownership. In addition to his views on justice and the protection of rights, Kant is known for his conception of a republican form of government. Kant's ideal government is one that is based on the rule of law, the separation of powers, and the protection of individual freedoms. He believed that a republican constitution, one that is founded on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, would best protect the rights and autonomy of citizens. In his essay Perpetual Peace, 1795, Kant outlines the principles of a just republic, advocating for the establishment of democratic institutions that respect the moral rights of individuals and promote the common good. His vision of a republican government is grounded in his belief that individuals must be free to pursue their own rational ends, and that the state's role is to ensure that individuals have the freedom to do so in a manner consistent with the moral law. Kant's theory of international relations is also significant, as it represents a radical departure from the traditional notion of power politics that dominated his time. In Perpetual Peace, Kant argues that lasting peace can only be achieved through the establishment of a federation of free states that respect the rights of individuals. Kant believed that the principles of republican government could be extended to the international realm, and that a system of international cooperation, based on respect for human rights and the rule of law, could provide the foundation for a just global order. His vision of a peaceful and just international system has had a lasting impact on the development of international law and the modern understanding of human rights. Kant's political philosophy has been both praised and criticized for its idealism. His emphasis on individual autonomy, universal moral principles, and the rule of law presents a vision of a just society that is based on reason and respect for human dignity. However, some critics have argued that Kant's political theory is overly abstract and unrealistic, particularly in its reliance on the idea of a rational will that can be universally applied. Others have pointed to the tension between Kant's commitment to individual rights and his support for the authority of the state, questioning whether his theory can adequately address issues of political power and social inequality. Despite these criticisms, Kant's political thought continues to be influential, particularly in contemporary discussions of human rights, democratic theory, and international justice. One of the most enduring aspects of Kant's political philosophy is his conception of a cosmopolitan order, in which individuals are recognized as citizens of the world, rather than merely subjects of individual states. Kant's idea of cosmopolitanism is grounded in his belief that all human beings possess inherent dignity and are entitled to certain universal rights. In this sense, Kant's political thought foreshadowed the development of international human rights frameworks and the idea of global justice. His vision of a peaceful, just, and cooperative international order continues to inform debates on global governance, humanitarian intervention, and the responsibility of states to protect the rights of individuals. Kant's political philosophy represents a radical and influential vision of justice, autonomy, and human rights. His emphasis on the moral law, the protection of individual rights, and the creation of a just society rooted in reason and universal principles has had a profound impact on political thought, both in the realm of domestic politics and international relations. While his ideas have been subject to criticism for their idealism and abstraction, Kant's contributions to political philosophy continue to shape contemporary discussions of justice, democracy, and the moral responsibilities of individuals and states. Through his exploration of freedom, autonomy, and the principles of a just republic, Kant established a moral and political framework that remains relevant and compelling in the modern world. Immanuel Kant's philosophy is often associated with the intellectual movement of the Enlightenment, a period characterized by an emphasis on reason, scientific inquiry, individual liberty, and the pursuit of progress. Kant's own engagement with Enlightenment ideals, however, is particularly significant because he not only participated in these debates, but also sought to redefine them. His writings on autonomy, reason, and the public sphere highlight his commitment to the Enlightenment's core tenets, while also offering a unique perspective that would shape the intellectual trajectory of the modern age. This chapter examines Kant's relationship with the Enlightenment, focusing on his views on reason, progress, and his conception of the public sphere as a site of rational discourse and the development of critical thought. At the heart of Kant's thought is the belief in human reason as the central tool for understanding the world and for guiding moral action. In his famous essay, What is Enlightenment? 1784, Kant famously declares that enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. He defines immaturity as the inability to use one's reason without the guidance of others, particularly religious or political authorities. Kant argues that the essence of the Enlightenment is the freedom to use one's own reason and to seek knowledge independently of external constraints. This view places reason as the guiding force not only in ethics, but in all areas of human life, including science, politics, and culture. Kant's emphasis on reason is tied to his broader critique of authority and tradition. He argues that human beings must free themselves from the shackles of dogma and superstition, which impede the exercise of independent thought. This radical call for intellectual freedom challenges the established powers of his time, including religious institutions and absolutist monarchies. While Kant recognized the importance of tradition in shaping human life, he maintained that tradition should never be followed unquestioningly. Instead, it must be subjected to critical examination through the lens of reason. In this sense, Kant's Enlightenment philosophy shares a kinship with other Enlightenment thinkers, such as Voltaire and Rousseau, who similarly critiqued religious and political authority, albeit in different ways. While Kant is often seen as a proponent of Enlightenment rationalism, his conception of reason differs from that of many of his contemporaries. Whereas thinkers like René Descartes or Leibniz emphasized the role of reason in uncovering universal truths, Kant introduced a more skeptical stance. He argued that reason is limited by the structure of human experience itself. In his critique of pure reason, Kant proposed that while reason can provide knowledge of the empirical world, it cannot access things as they are in themselves, the noumenal world. This represents a departure from the more optimistic Enlightenment view that reason could uncover objective truths about the world in a straightforward manner. For Kant, reason is not an unimpeded force of discovery, but is constrained by the way human beings perceive and structure their experiences. Despite his skepticism about reason's unbounded capacity, Kant remained a staunch believer in its role as a guiding force for human progress. He argued that the Enlightenment represented a turning point in history, a period in which humans were beginning to shed their dependence on external authority and to develop their capacity for autonomous thought. In this sense, Kant saw the Enlightenment as an ongoing project, one that would unfold over time as individuals and societies gradually come to recognize the value of reason. This process of intellectual and moral development, Kant believed, would lead to progress both within individuals and in society at large. Kant's conception of progress is deeply intertwined with his idea of history as a teleological process. In his essay, Idea for a Universal History with a Cosmopolitan Purpose, 1784, Kant argues that human history unfolds according to a rational plan, with the ultimate goal being the establishment of a just, peaceful, and enlightened world society. Kant's view of history is not one of blind forces or mere chance, but of a directionality toward increasing rationality and freedom. He acknowledges that the path to this ideal state may be fraught with setbacks, including wars and injustices, but he maintains that, on the whole, human society is moving toward greater moral and political enlightenment. This belief in historical progress aligns with the broader Enlightenment faith in human reason and its potential to improve the condition of humanity. Kant's teleological view of history also suggests a belief in the power of individuals to contribute to the realization of this progress. He argues that individuals, through the exercise of their reason, play a crucial role in shaping the course of history. In his view, the development of human history depends on the collective actions of free individuals who are guided by moral principles and reasoned judgment. For Kant, personal autonomy and the ability to act according to moral duty are essential components of progress. This vision of progress is not merely about technological advancements or material prosperity. It is about the moral and intellectual development of individuals and societies. A significant aspect of Kant's Enlightenment thought is his conception of the public sphere, which he viewed as a crucial space for the exercise of reason and the exchange of ideas. In his essay, What is Enlightenment?, Kant emphasizes the importance of public discourse in the process of enlightenment. He argues that individuals should be free to debate, critique, and challenge established ideas in a public forum. The ability to reason publicly, to engage in open and critical discussions, is, for Kant, essential to the Enlightenment process. He stresses the importance of free expression and intellectual freedom in enabling individuals to refine their thinking and move toward greater understanding. For Kant, the public sphere is not just a space for academic debate, but also for practical engagement with political and social issues. He envisioned a society in which citizens could participate in the formation of public opinion, shaping the direction of political and moral life through reasoned dialogue. This conception of the public sphere is one that resonates with later democratic thinkers, particularly those in the tradition of Jürgen Habermas, who would later expand on Kant's ideas about public deliberation and the role of reason in democratic governance. Kant's insistence on the public sphere as a site for critical reasoning reflects his broader commitment to a society in which individuals are free to think, speak, and act according to their own rational will. Kant's critique of political authority is another key aspect of his Enlightenment philosophy. He rejected the idea that political power could be justified by divine right or the mere will of the ruler. Instead, Kant argued that political authority must be rooted in the consent of the governed and in the recognition of the rational autonomy of individuals. His political philosophy, particularly his ideas on republicanism, is grounded in the belief that the state exists to protect individual freedom and to ensure that all citizens can exercise their reason and moral judgment. Kant's conception of the state as a facilitator of freedom and autonomy reflects the Enlightenment ideal of a government that is both just and rational. Kant's vision of the Enlightenment, then, is not one of mere intellectual achievement, but of moral and political transformation. He saw the Enlightenment as a continuous process of human self-improvement, in which reason and autonomy guide individuals and societies toward greater justice, equality, and freedom. This vision is both optimistic and realistic. While Kant acknowledged the obstacles that impede human progress, he remained confident that reason, in the long run, would triumph. For Kant, the Enlightenment was not just an era or a set of ideas, but a timeless aspiration toward greater intellectual and moral clarity, a vision that continues to resonate in the modern world. Immanuel Kant's relationship with the Enlightenment is marked by both a deep engagement with its ideals and a critical reworking of its assumptions. His emphasis on reason, autonomy, and public discourse represents a continuation of Enlightenment thought, while his skepticism about the limits of human knowledge and his belief in the telos of history offer a more nuanced and complex vision of progress. Kant's ideas about the role of reason in both the private and public spheres, as well as his conception of the state and its relationship to individual freedom, remains central to contemporary discussions of political philosophy and the continued relevance of Enlightenment ideals in modern society. Through his work, Kant not only shaped the intellectual contours of the Enlightenment, but also redefined its ultimate aims, contributing to a vision of human progress that continues to inform political and philosophical thought today. Immanuel Kant's philosophical contributions have had a profound and lasting impact on Western thought, shaping fields ranging from ethics and epistemology to political philosophy and aesthetics. His critical philosophy, with its emphasis on reason, autonomy, and the limits of human knowledge, marked a turning point in the history of philosophy. Kant's legacy is not confined to his own time. It continues to resonate with contemporary philosophers, intellectuals, and political theorists. However, as with any major intellectual figure, Kant's work has not been free from criticism. This chapter explores Kant's enduring legacy, as well as some of the significant criticisms that have been levied against his philosophy, focusing on the areas of epistemology, ethics, politics, and metaphysics. Kant's critique of pure reason remains one of the most important works in modern philosophy. His Copernican revolution in philosophy, which asserted that the structure of human cognition shapes the way we experience the world, shifted the focus of philosophical inquiry from the external world to the nature of human perception and knowledge. Kant's idea that we can never have direct knowledge of the things in themselves, noumena, but only of phenomena, things as they appear to us, fundamentally altered the trajectory of epistemology. This view of knowledge as inherently bound by human cognitive structures influenced subsequent philosophical movements, such as German idealism, phenomenology, and analytic philosophy. Kant's epistemology also had a significant influence on the development of modern science. By asserting that our understanding of the world is shaped by both sensory experience and innate cognitive structures, the categories of the mind, Kant provided a framework for understanding how scientific knowledge is constructed. His idea that science deals with phenomena, not with the ultimate nature of things, opened the door for a scientific approach that focuses on observable, empirical data, while recognizing the limitations of human cognition. This view would later be adopted and expanded upon by thinkers like Heinrich Hertz and Ernst Mach, who sought to understand the relationship between human perception and scientific theories. Despite the profound influence of Kant's epistemology, some critics have argued that his distinction between phenomena and noumena creates a problematic dualism. If we cannot know things as they are in themselves, critics ask, how can we be certain that our concepts and categories accurately represent the world? This problem, often referred to as the Kantian paradox, has led some philosophers, particularly empiricists and naturalists, to question the coherence of Kant's system. They argue that Kant's focus on the limitations of human knowledge may lead to an untenable skepticism about our ability to understand reality. Some contemporary philosophers, including those in the tradition of scientific realism, maintain that the world exists independently of our minds, and that it is possible to describe the objective nature of reality, even if our knowledge is fallible. Kant's moral philosophy, with its emphasis on duty, autonomy, and the categorical imperative, has also been the subject of much debate. On the one hand, Kant's insistence that morality is grounded in rational principles has been praised for its universalism and its emphasis on human dignity. The categorical imperative, which commands individuals to act only according to maxims that can be willed as a universal law, provides a powerful foundation for moral action, and it has been particularly influential in the development of human rights discourse. Kant's commitment to autonomy and the idea that individuals must act in accordance with their own rational will continues to inform contemporary ethical theories, particularly in the realm of bioethics and moral philosophy. However, Kant's moral philosophy has also faced significant criticisms. Some critics argue that his deontological approach to ethics, which emphasizes duty over consequences, can lead to rigid and impractical moral prescriptions. For example, Kant's insistence that one must always tell the truth, even in situations where lying could prevent harm, has been criticized for its lack of flexibility. Critics such as John Stuart Mill have argued that moral decisions should be guided by the consequences of actions, not merely by abstract rules. In contrast to Kant's absolutism, utilitarian philosophers argue that the ultimate aim of morality should be the promotion of overall happiness or well-being, rather than adherence to a set of duties. This tension between deontological and consequentialist approaches remains a central issue in contemporary moral philosophy. Moreover, Kant's emphasis on universal moral laws has been criticized for its lack of attention to the complexities of human experience. Critics argue that Kant's abstract formulations of moral duties fail to account for the particularities of individual lives and social contexts. Feminist philosophers, in particular, have pointed to the limitations of Kant's moral framework in addressing issues of gender, power, and inequality. They argue that Kant's focus on abstract rationality often overlooks the lived experiences of marginalized groups, whose voices may be excluded from the universal moral discourse. The tension between universal moral principles and the recognition of particularity remains a key challenge in the interpretation of Kant's ethics. In the political realm, Kant's ideas about justice, autonomy, and the state have had a lasting impact, particularly on theories of democracy and human rights. His belief that legitimate political authority must be grounded in the consent of the governed and must respect the autonomy of individuals has influenced democratic theorists and advocates of constitutional law. Kant's vision of a republican government, in which political power is divided and subject to the rule of law, has been highly influential in shaping modern political institutions. His Perpetual Peace essay, with its call for a League of Nations to prevent war and promote global cooperation, also foreshadowed the development of international organizations like the United Nations. However, Kant's political philosophy has also been critiqued for its limited applicability to the challenges of modern political life. Some scholars have pointed out that Kant's ideal of a republic, in which citizens participate in the formation of public law, may be unrealistic in large, complex modern societies. Critics argue that Kant's focus on individual autonomy and moral duties does not adequately address issues of social inequality, economic justice, and the complexities of collective decision-making. Furthermore, Kant's conception of cosmopolitanism, which envisions a world of free republics united by common moral principles, has been criticized for its idealism and lack of practical solutions to the problems of global inequality and conflict. In the realm of metaphysics, Kant's critique of speculative philosophy, particularly his rejection of metaphysical claims about the nature of God, the soul, and the afterlife, has been a subject of both admiration and controversy. Kant's argument that metaphysical claims cannot be justified through reason alone has had a lasting influence on the development of philosophy, particularly in the development of empirical and naturalistic approaches to metaphysics. However, some religious philosophers have criticized Kant's position for its dismissal of metaphysical and theological questions as beyond the reach of human knowledge. Kant's insistence on the limits of human reason has led some to question whether his system ultimately leaves room for genuine religious belief or spiritual experience. Despite these criticisms, Kant's work remains a foundational pillar of modern philosophy. His critique of reason, his emphasis on autonomy and moral duty, and his contributions to political theory and metaphysics continue to shape contemporary thought. Many of the debates he initiated, particularly those surrounding the nature of human knowledge, ethics, and the role of the state, remain central to philosophical discourse today. His influence can be seen in a wide range of philosophical traditions, including existentialism, phenomenology, analytic philosophy, and pragmatism. Moreover, Kant's philosophy has experienced a resurgence in recent decades, particularly in the fields of political theory, ethics, and international relations. His ideas about the role of reason in public discourse, his vision of a just society based on the moral law, and his commitment to human dignity continue to resonate with contemporary thinkers concerned with issues of justice, democracy, and global peace. Kant's legacy also persists in the ongoing development of critical theory, where his ideas about autonomy, enlightenment, and progress continue to inform debates about human emancipation and the possibilities for a better future. Immanuel Kant's philosophy remains a cornerstone of modern intellectual life. His contributions to epistemology, ethics, political theory, and metaphysics have shaped the course of Western thought, while his ideas continue to inspire contemporary philosophers and political theorists. While his work has been subject to significant criticism, it is undeniable that Kant's philosophy has endured because of its depth, rigor, and its ability to engage with fundamental questions about human reason, morality, and society. His legacy, though contested, remains central to ongoing discussions about the nature of knowledge, the moral law, and the ideal structure of political life. Immanuel Kant's philosophy profoundly influenced not only the intellectual climate of his time, but also the philosophical movements that followed in the centuries after his death. His critique of reason, moral philosophy, and political theory created a foundational framework that successive philosophers would either build upon or react against. This chapter will explore Kant's influence on the development of several key philosophical movements, including German idealism, pragmatism, and critical theory, as well as his lasting impact on contemporary debates in epistemology, ethics, and political philosophy. One of the most direct philosophical movements to emerge in response to Kant was German idealism. Philosophers such as Johann Gottlieb Fichte, Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph Schelling, and George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel developed their systems of thought by addressing and expanding upon Kant's ideas. German idealism sought to resolve some of the tensions in Kant's philosophy, particularly his distinction between the phenomenal and noumenal worlds, where Kant had insisted that the noumenal world, things as they are in themselves, was inaccessible to human knowledge. The German idealists argued that the human mind plays a more active role in shaping not only our experience of the world, but also the world itself. Fichte, for example, took Kant's notion of the transcendental subject, the individual mind, as the condition for the possibility of experience, and pushed it further by emphasizing the self-positing nature of the ego. For Fichte, the self was not merely a passive recipient of experience, as Kant had suggested, but rather an active, creative force that brings the world into being. This idealist emphasis on the self as a fundamental principle of reality was further developed by Schelling, who explored the relationship between nature and spirit, and Hegel, who famously argued that history itself is a process of rational development, driven by the dialectical unfolding of ideas. Hegel's system of absolute idealism marked the culmination of German idealism, and while his philosophy diverged significantly from Kant's, it remains deeply indebted to Kant's critique of metaphysics and his attempt to reconcile reason with experience. Despite the importance of German idealism, Kant's influence was not limited to idealism alone. His philosophy also had a significant impact on the development of pragmatism in the United States, particularly through the work of thinkers like Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, and John Dewey. Pragmatism, with its emphasis on the practical consequences of ideas and its rejection of abstract, speculative philosophy, was in many ways a response to Kant's emphasis on the limits of human knowledge. Pragmatists were critical of Kant's distinction between the noumenal and phenomenal realms, viewing it as an unnecessary metaphysical abstraction that hampered practical inquiry. Instead, they focused on the ways in which human beings engage with the world through action and experience. Peirce, for example, rejected the notion that human knowledge is constrained by the limits of sensory experience, as Kant had proposed. For Peirce, knowledge is a dynamic, evolving process that is constantly subject to revision and refinement in light of new experiences. He argued that ideas must be evaluated based on their practical implications and their ability to guide successful action in the world. This emphasis on the practical function of ideas aligns with Kant's notion that knowledge must be rooted in experience. But pragmatism goes a step further by focusing on the ways in which knowledge is contingent upon practical engagement with the world, rather than abstract principles or metaphysical speculation. William James, one of the most prominent figures in American pragmatism, was similarly influenced by Kant's ideas, though he diverged from Kant's transcendental idealism. James's concept of the will to believe illustrates his departure from Kant's more rigid framework, embracing a more flexible and pluralistic view of knowledge. While Kant had argued that knowledge must be constrained by rational categories, James emphasized the importance of personal experience and subjective belief in shaping our understanding of the world. This shift from Kant's more structured epistemology to a more experiential, practical approach underscores the differences between idealism and pragmatism, even as both traditions remain deeply engaged with the problem of how we know the world and our place within it. Kant's influence also extends to the development of critical theory, particularly in the Frankfurt School. Philosophers such as Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, and Herbert Marcuse were profoundly influenced by Kant's critique of reason, particularly his insights into the limitations of human knowledge and the potential for reason to be distorted by social and political forces. Kant's moral philosophy, with its emphasis on autonomy and the categorical imperative, provided a foundation for critical theorists who sought to critique oppressive social systems and promote human emancipation. However, the Frankfurt School also critiqued Kant's more optimistic view of progress, arguing that the rationality of modern society had become instrumentalized and that genuine freedom could not be achieved within the confines of capitalist societies. Adorno, for instance, drew on Kant's ideas to develop his concept of negative dialectics, a method of critical inquiry that resists the synthesis of contradictions into harmonious totalities. This approach was a direct challenge to Hegelian idealism, which sought to resolve contradictions within a unified system. Adorno's negative dialectics, influenced by Kant's insistence on the limits of reason and his critique of metaphysics, sought to expose the ways in which philosophical systems often serve to legitimize oppressive social structures. In this sense, Kant's philosophy provided the critical tools for understanding how reason could be co-opted by ideology, a theme that remains central to contemporary discussions of power and society. Furthermore, Kant's political philosophy continues to inform debates on democracy, justice, and human rights. His belief in the inherent dignity of individuals, grounded in their capacity for reason and autonomy, resonates with contemporary theories of liberal democracy and human rights. Kant's perpetual peace and his vision of a cosmopolitan world order influenced later thinkers such as John Rawls, who drew on Kantian ideas to develop his theory of justice as fairness. Rawls's emphasis on the veil of ignorance and his principles of justice, which prioritize equality and fairness, are rooted in Kantian moral principles, particularly the idea that individuals must be treated as ends in themselves, never merely as means to an end. However, Kant's political philosophy has also been critiqued by contemporary scholars who question its applicability to modern global challenges. Critics argue that Kant's ideal of a cosmopolitan order based on universal moral laws is overly idealistic and fails to address the complexities of contemporary global inequality, imperialism, and power relations. Furthermore, Kant's focus on individual autonomy and moral duty has been critiqued for downplaying the social and collective dimensions of justice. Feminist theorists, in particular, have pointed out that Kant's emphasis on abstract rationality and individual autonomy often ignores the ways in which social structures of power and inequality shape the lives of marginalized groups. The tension between universal moral principles and the recognition of particular social contexts continues to be a major challenge in interpreting Kant's political thought. Kant's influence also extends to the realm of aesthetics, where his ideas on beauty, the sublime, and the nature of artistic experience have shaped subsequent developments in philosophy of art. In his critique of judgment, Kant explored the nature of aesthetic experience, arguing that judgments of beauty are subjective but also have a universalizing claim. According to Kant, when we judge something to be beautiful, we are not simply expressing a personal preference but making a claim that others should agree with, even though beauty is not a property of the object itself. This notion of aesthetic universality has had a lasting impact on aesthetics, influencing thinkers such as Friedrich Schiller, who explored the role of art in moral and social development, and more recently, the work of philosopher Arthur Danto, who addressed the relationship between art and meaning in the postmodern era. Kant's philosophy continues to shape a vast array of philosophical movements and intellectual traditions, ranging from German idealism to pragmatism, critical theory, political philosophy, and aesthetics. His contributions to epistemology, ethics, political theory, and metaphysics remain central to contemporary debates, even as his work has been critiqued and developed in various directions. Kant's influence is a testament to the power of his ideas and their enduring relevance in shaping the trajectory of modern thought. While his philosophy is not without its limitations, Kant's vision of reason, autonomy, and progress remains a foundational framework for understanding human experience, knowledge, and society. Immanuel Kant's intellectual legacy, over 2 centuries after his death, remains a crucial point of reference for contemporary philosophical discourse. His innovative approaches to epistemology, ethics, political philosophy, and metaphysics have proven to be foundational pillars in modern philosophical thinking. Kant's critiques of reason, moral duty, and the structure of knowledge not only shaped the intellectual currents of his time, but also provided a framework that continues to influence contemporary debates in various fields of philosophy, science, and politics. This chapter will explore the enduring relevance of Kant's philosophy in the present day, examining how his ideas continue to inform and challenge modern philosophical thought and societal concerns. Kant's critique of knowledge, particularly his critique of pure reason, laid the groundwork for much of modern epistemology. His argument that knowledge is shaped by the cognitive structures of the mind, such as the categories of space, time, and causality, provides a framework for understanding how humans engage with the world. In an era increasingly dominated by scientific and technological advancements, Kant's recognition of the limits of human cognition remains particularly significant. While empirical science continues to expand our knowledge of the natural world, Kant's insight that human perception and conceptualization impose structure on our experience continues to influence discussions in philosophy of mind and cognitive science. His view that we can never access the things in themselves, noumena, challenges contemporary theories of scientific realism that assert a direct correspondence between our perceptions and the objective world. In the context of contemporary epistemology, Kant's work resonates with the arguments of philosophers who question the objectivity of knowledge and the role of human interpretation in constructing reality. His critique of metaphysics, which argues that knowledge about the world must be grounded in experience and cannot exceed the bounds of what is empirically verifiable, speaks to the current debate between empiricism and rationalism. Though scientific progress has made great strides, Kant's insistence on the limits of human reason cautions against overconfidence in our ability to know the world beyond our perceptual and cognitive capacities. This remains a touchstone for contemporary philosophers like Thomas Kuhn, who, in his work on paradigms and scientific revolutions, echoes Kant's insight that the structures through which we perceive and interpret the world influence the kinds of knowledge we produce. Similarly, Kant's moral philosophy, particularly his conception of the categorical imperative, continues to be influential in contemporary ethical theory. His insistence on universal moral laws and the intrinsic worth of the individual has had a profound impact on human rights discourse. Kantian ethics has inspired movements advocating for the inherent dignity and equality of individuals, grounded in the belief that every human being, as a rational agent, must be treated as an end in themselves, never merely as a means to an end. In an age where questions of justice, equality, and human rights remain central, Kant's moral framework provides a valuable guide for addressing contemporary ethical dilemmas, from global poverty to climate change. However, Kant's moral philosophy has also faced significant challenges in the modern world. Critics argue that his approach, with its focus on duty and abstract principles, may lack the flexibility needed to address the complexities of modern ethical issues. Contemporary moral theorists like John Rawls, who developed his theory of justice based on Kantian principles, have modified Kant's ideas to fit the realities of contemporary political and social life. Rawls's theory, for example, emphasizes fairness and the redistribution of resources, offering a more practical framework for addressing inequality than Kant's rigid system of duties. Similarly, feminist philosophers and ethicists from diverse traditions have critiqued Kant's abstract approach to ethics, arguing that it often overlooks the lived experiences of marginalized groups and fails to account for relational and context-dependent moral considerations. Kant's political philosophy, particularly his ideas on autonomy, republicanism, and perpetual peace, remains a key point of reference in contemporary political theory. His vision of a just society, one based on the principles of freedom and equality, continues to inform liberal democratic thought. Kant's emphasis on the autonomy of the individual, the idea that moral agents must be free to make rational decisions, resonates with contemporary ideas about human rights and the role of the state in ensuring individual freedoms. His concept of cosmopolitanism, which envisions a world of free republics bound together by common moral principles, has influenced modern conceptions of international relations and global justice, especially in discussions surrounding the global governance of human rights and peace. Yet, Kant's political thought also faces significant challenges in the context of modern political realities. The complexities of global politics, with its entanglement in issues like economic inequality, nationalism, and international conflict, raise questions about the feasibility of Kant's ideal of perpetual peace. Critics argue that Kant's vision of a cosmopolitan world order is overly optimistic, and that the institutions and structures required for such a system to function effectively are not yet in place. Furthermore, debates over national sovereignty, global capitalism, and the growing influence of transnational corporations suggest that Kant's political ideas may need to be adapted to account for the intricacies of contemporary geopolitics. Scholars continue to explore how Kant's principles of justice, autonomy, and peace can be applied in a world marked by economic and cultural disparities. In the realm of contemporary philosophy, Kant's influence can also be seen in the ongoing development of critical theory, especially in the work of philosophers associated with the Frankfurt School. Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, and Herbert Marcuse, who were influenced by Kant's critique of reason, sought to expose the ways in which rationality and knowledge are often manipulated and distorted by social, economic, and political forces. Adorno's concept of negative dialectics, which seeks to reveal contradictions and prevent the reconciliation of opposing forces into a single system, echoes Kant's concern with the limits of reason and the possibility of false totalities. In this sense, Kant's philosophy continues to serve as a foundation for critical theorists who seek to challenge oppressive power structures and promote human emancipation. Moreover, contemporary discussions surrounding environmental ethics and bioethics also find resonance with Kant's moral philosophy. His emphasis on the intrinsic value of rational agents and his insistence on the moral worth of individuals have informed contemporary debates about the ethical treatment of non-human animals, the environment, and future generations. Kant's focus on duty and moral law provides a useful framework for addressing issues related to sustainability, environmental justice, and the moral obligations of individuals and states to protect the planet. While some critics argue that Kant's anthropocentric ethical system may be insufficient to address the needs of the environment, his moral principles continue to inspire ongoing discussions about the ethical implications of human actions on the natural world. Kant's philosophy also remains relevant in contemporary debates about the nature of truth and objectivity, particularly in the age of postmodernism and relativism. Kant's insistence on the necessity of objective structures for knowledge, even while acknowledging the limitations of human perception, provides a counterpoint to relativist and constructivist accounts of truth that are prevalent in some circles today. Kant's emphasis on the need for universal principles, grounded in reason, offers a robust defense of objective truth and the possibility of rational consensus, even in a fragmented world where different cultures and societies may have varying beliefs and practices. His philosophy continues to challenge the postmodern skepticism that questions the possibility of universal truth and highlights the need for reasoned dialogue and discourse in the search for common understanding. Finally, Kant's ideas about enlightenment, autonomy, and human progress continue to inspire contemporary thinkers who are concerned with the future of human society. His call for individuals to think for themselves, to break free from the shackles of dogma and tradition, speaks to modern movements advocating for education, democracy, and social justice. Kant's vision of human beings as autonomous agents, capable of self-determined action based on rational principles, remains a powerful ideal for those seeking to address global challenges such as poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation. In conclusion, The contemporary relevance of Immanuel Kant's thought is undeniable. His ideas about knowledge, morality, politics, and human autonomy continue to shape philosophical discourse and influence societal developments. While Kant's philosophy is not without its criticisms, his emphasis on reason, individual dignity, and the moral law offers a framework for addressing the pressing issues of our time. Kant's intellectual legacy remains a beacon for modern philosophers, social theorists, and political thinkers, reminding us of the importance of reason, autonomy, and justice in shaping a better future.